Take a moment to close your eyes and reflect on that one aspect of your life that you wish you could change or bring back. Perhaps it's a precious relationship that slipped away, a career setback that still lingers, or a mistake that continues to echo in your mind. Now open your eyes and picture this. What if God could take that very pain and transform it into something breathtaking, something beautiful beyond your imagination? The fact that you chose to click on this video could be a powerful sign that God is reaching out to you, offering a chance to redeem those years that may have felt wasted. This is your calling to embrace the possibility of renewal. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. These words from Jeremiah 29:11 have comforted millions. But have you ever wondered what they really mean in the face of real-life heartbreak and loss? Stick around until the end, because we'll unpack this powerful promise and show you how God's restoration goes far beyond what we can imagine. You'll discover how your past pain can become the very thing God uses to bring hope to others. Have you ever looked at your life and felt utterly shattered, like a vase that has been dropped and left in pieces? You're not alone in that feeling, yet there's hope, and it comes from an unexpected source, a potter's workshop. Let's rewind to a moment when God guided the prophet Jeremiah to a potter's house. Imagine Jeremiah stepping inside, eager to discover what he would find. The potter is at his wheel, hands smeared with clay, diligently crafting a new vessel. As Jeremiah observes, something goes awry. The vessel the potter is creating suddenly crumples, falling apart right on the wheel. In that instant, it appears as if all the potter's effort has been for nothing. The lump of clay sits there, deformed and unattractive. It no longer resembles the exquisite pot it was destined to become. Many of us can relate to that feeling. We stumble, we endure hardships, and we often see ourselves as failures. We believe our lives are irreparably damaged, but here's the twist. The potter doesn't discard the clay. He never gives up. Instead, he begins anew. His expert hands work tirelessly to reshape the clay, molding and refining it once more. Before long, a new form emerges. It may differ from the original, but it possesses its own unique beauty. The potter transforms what once seemed like a catastrophe into something extraordinary. This is a perfect parallel to how God operates in our lives. When we feel shattered, He doesn't cast us aside. He doesn't abandon us. Rather, He begins to reshape us. He takes our failures, our regrets, and our broken aspirations. In His hands, they transform into the foundation for something new and beautiful. Think for a moment about your own journey, those instances when you felt utterly defeated. God can repurpose them. That relationship that deteriorated, God can restore it. That error you can't seem to let go of, God can change it into a lesson. Our lives are like clay in the hands of the master potter. God is continually working, endlessly molding, and creatively designing something new. Even when we're not aware of it, He's shaping us into something magnificent. So the next time you feel crushed or irreparable, remember the potter's workshop. Remember that in God's hands, nothing is wasted. Your setbacks can become stepping stones to something greater. Your failures can lay the groundwork for future triumphs. God isn't done with you yet. He's still at work, still molding, still crafting. And the masterpiece He's creating from your life will be more beautiful than you can ever envision. God's ability to restore the broken is truly astounding. Can He transform our gravest mistakes into our greatest purpose? Let's take a closer look at King David, whose remarkable journey reshapes our understanding of failure, forgiveness, and the path to renewal. David, a shepherd boy chosen by God, rose to become a mighty king. Yet even those destined for greatness can falter. In a moment of weakness, David succumbed to temptation, committing adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, one of his most devoted soldiers. When Bathsheba became pregnant, David's desperate attempts to conceal his sin escalated into tragedy. He orchestrated Uriah's death in battle. Imagine the crushing guilt that weighed upon David's heart. The shame would have loomed large in his mind as the consequences of his actions spiraled out of control. the child born from this grievous union died, and chaos disrupted David's once unified kingdom, fracturing it irrevocably. In those bleak times, David may have felt as shattered as a vessel on the potter's wheel. How could God ever use someone whose righteousness seemed tarnished? How could anything good arise from such profound mistakes? This is where God's restorative power truly shines. When confronted by the prophet Nathan, David did not buckle under defensiveness or seek to justify his sins. Instead, he experienced a profound moment of genuine repentance. We witness this heartfelt cry in Psalm 51, where he pleads, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." Such sincere repentance opened the doors to God's forgiveness and restoration, serving as a powerful testament that no fall is too great to escape His grace. But what's extraordinary is that God didn't simply restore David to his previous standing. He transformed David's brokenness into something even more magnificent. Through the depths of failure and the embrace of forgiveness, David forged a deeper relationship with God than ever before. His leadership evolved from one rooted in power and strategy to one grounded in humility and dependence on the divine. The Psalms he composed during and after this tumultuous period have since offered comfort and hope to countless generations. Moreover, the child born to David and Bathsheba after their repentance, Solomon, became one of the greatest kings of Israel. God took what should have marred David's legacy and instead used it to solidify his significance in history. What does this teach us? It illustrates that our most profound mistakes and regrets do not conclude our story. Rather, they could herald the start of a transformative new chapter where God's grace becomes even more evident. Your failures do not disqualify you from fulfilling God's purpose. These experiences may very well be the very things He uses to equip you for it. As we delve deeper into the theme of God's restorative power, let David's journey serve as an inspiration. From the depths of despair to the pinnacle of purpose, his life stands as a reminder that with God, nothing is wasted. Even our most challenging moments can become the backdrop for His greatest works. From a king to a fisherman, our exploration of God's restorative power reveals a profound and uplifting journey. Have you ever considered how someone can transition from denying their connection to Jesus to becoming the cornerstone of His church? Peter's transformation invites us to rethink our understanding of second chances. Imagine the scene. Jesus has just been arrested, and His disciples are feeling scattered, confused, and fearful. Peter, known for his boldness, had previously declared his unwavering loyalty to Jesus, even drawing his sword to defend Him in the garden. However, as the chilling reality of the night unfolds, Peter's confidence starts to falter. While Jesus is being interrogated, Peter finds himself lingering in the courtyard, attempting to blend in with the bystanders. A servant girl recognizes him and asks, "You were with Jesus, weren't you?" At that moment, fear overwhelms Peter, prompting him to deny knowing Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each denial feels more intense than the last. Then, as the rooster crows, Peter's gaze meets Jesus, and the gravity of his actions hits him. It's easy to empathize with the shame and self-reproach Peter must have felt. This wasn't merely a mistake, it was a profound moment of betrayal. A man who had witnessed miracles and boldly proclaimed Jesus as the Messiah had now distanced himself in fear. Many of us can relate to the fear of making irreversible mistakes. We've all experienced moments of letting down those we care about or falling short of our ideals. However, Peter's denial strikes even deeper. He may have questioned how he could ever reconcile with Jesus or regain the trust of his leader. In the days following Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, Peter likely grappled with profound questions. Would Jesus want to see him again? Had he forfeited his place among the other disciples? Once defined by clarity, his future now seemed clouded by doubt. Yet, in His boundless mercy and love, Jesus was not done with Peter. After His resurrection, He intentionally seeks Peter out. Picture the scene on the shores of Galilee, where Jesus asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" With each affirmation, Jesus thoughtfully restores Peter, entrusting him with the care of his followers. This encounter beautifully mirrors Peter's 3 denials, presenting him with 3 opportunities to reaffirm his love. What remarkable blessings emerged from Peter's darkest hour. Through his trials and eventual restoration, Peter developed a profound humility and a deeper understanding of God's grace. This once broken fisherman grew to become a dynamic leader in the early church, boldly sharing the gospel and ultimately sacrificing his life for his faith. Peter's journey serves as a powerful reminder that our failures do not disqualify us from fulfilling God's purpose. In fact, these very challenges can shape us for greater service. From cowardice to courage and weakness to strength, Peter's story exemplifies the transformative nature of God's forgiveness and grace. It's often in our most challenging moments that God accomplishes his most beautiful work of restoration. What if those who attempted to ruin you turned out to be essential for your rescue? Joseph's tale challenges our perceptions of family, forgiveness, and destiny. As we explore his journey, get ready to witness how God can transform betrayal in unimaginable ways. Joseph was a dreamer, endowed with divine visions that hinted at a remarkable future. However, these dreams ignited jealousy within his brothers. Can you fathom the heartache of being cast aside by your own family? Driven by envy, Joseph's brothers devised a scheme to eliminate him entirely. They cast him into a pit and sold him into slavery, deceiving their father into believing he had been killed by a wild beast. In a heartbeat, Joseph transitioned from favored son to foreign slave. He found himself in Egypt, far away from home, stripped of his identity and future. Yet, even in this bleak hour, Joseph held tightly to his faith. Have you ever encountered a situation that felt utterly hopeless? Joseph's narrative serves as a reminder that God is at work even when we fail to recognize it. In Egypt, Joseph endured one trial after another. He was wrongfully accused and imprisoned. Years passed, and it may have seemed as though God had forgotten him. Nevertheless, Joseph persevered. He continued to employ his God-given abilities, interpreting dreams for other prisoners. His faith remained unwavering, even when his circumstances suggested he had been forsaken. How can we maintain our faith amid prolonged hardship? Joseph's story demonstrates that it is indeed possible to trust God even when life appears nonsensical. He chose to view each difficulty as a chance to assist others and honor God, rather than succumbing to bitterness or despair. Just when it appeared that Joseph's tale would conclude in obscurity, God arranged for a remarkable reversal. Pharaoh experienced a dream that no one could decipher, and Joseph was suddenly called upon. His divinely inspired wisdom not only resolved Pharaoh's dilemma, but also propelled him to a powerful position, second only to Pharaoh. Yet the story doesn't conclude there. Years later, a famine brought Joseph face to face with the very brothers who had betrayed him. Now their lives depended on him. What choice would he make? In a moment that continues to leave us in awe, Joseph opted for forgiveness instead of vengeance. "You intended harm against me," he told them, "but God intended it for good." Why does God permit us to endure failure and suffering? Joseph's life illustrates that our most significant pain can become the foundation for our greatest purpose. His hardships equipped him to save not just his family, but an entire nation from starvation. The rejection he endured turned out to be the very catalyst for him to extend forgiveness and restoration. From a rejected dreamer to a national savior, Joseph's path reminds us that God's plans extend beyond our pain. He can use even our deepest wounds to prepare us for a more significant destiny. As we confront our own challenges, let us keep Joseph in mind and trust that God is intricately weaving a beautiful tapestry from the frayed threads of our lives. Have you ever made a decision so terrible that you believed there was no returning from it? The parable of the prodigal son leads us on a path from the peaks of pride to the valleys of hopelessness. Yet it's within those low points that we uncover a truth about God's love that seems almost unbelievable. Imagine a young man bursting with ambition and restless energy. He approaches his father with a brazen request, Give me my share of the inheritance right now. It's a grave insult, effectively stating, I wish you were no longer alive. Amazingly, the father complies. The son gathers his belongings and departs for a far-off land, his pockets heavy and his heart light. Initially, life appears exhilarating. He enjoys himself, surrounded by new friends and limitless entertainment. But as the money runs out, so do the good times. Before long, he's alone and destitute in a foreign country. A severe famine strikes, leaving him with no option but to take the only job he can find, caring for pigs, a deeply humiliating task for a Jewish man. Can you picture the burden of his regret? Standing there, stomach rumbling, longing for the slop he feeds to the pigs, reality strikes him hard. He's made a grave error. In this moment of realization, he recalls home, his father's house, where even the servants have ample food. Shame and feelings of unworthiness overwhelm him. How could he ever return? What would others think? Would his father even recognize him, or worse, welcome him back? The fear of being rejected looms large, but desperation spurs him to take a risk. He rehearses a plea, hoping to convince his father to accept him as a hired worker. It's a long shot, but it's all he has left. As he nears home, heart racing, he spots a figure in the distance. Could it be? Yes, it's his father, and he's running. In that cultural context, it was considered undignified for an older man to run, but this father is unconcerned about dignity. He's filled with joy at the sight of his wayward son. Before the son can complete his rehearsed apology, his father embraces him, requests the finest robe, a ring, and sandals, all symbols of his restored status within the family. He commands that a feast be prepared to celebrate, proclaiming, "This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found." This lavish reception challenges our understanding of forgiveness and redemption. The father's love surpasses anything the son could have hoped for or envisioned. It illustrates how God welcomes us when we choose to return to him. So, can God truly restore time that seems wasted or lost? The parable indicates that not only can he restore, but he does so with a celebration that eclipses our shame. Our Heavenly Father is always watching and waiting, eager to run to us with open arms the moment we decide to turn towards home. As we contemplate this tale, let's remember that no one is ever too lost. The transition from lost to found, from shame to honor, is merely a decision away. God's love always surpasses our errors, and his grace is perpetually more plentiful than our shame. God's love may be greater than our mistakes, but what happens when life itself seems to turn against us? Enter the story of Job, a man whose faith was tested in ways that pushed the limits of human endurance. What can we learn from someone who lost everything and still chose to trust? Job was a man known for his righteousness and prosperity. He had it all: a loving family, abundant wealth, and a reputation as a man of integrity. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Imagine waking up one day to find that your entire world has crumbled around you. This was Job's reality. In a series of devastating blows, Job lost his wealth, his children, and even his health. Can you picture the shock and grief? One moment, he's blessed beyond measure. The next, he's scraping his sores with broken pottery, sitting in ashes. It's a descent so swift and severe that it takes your breath away. As Job grappled with his new reality, he wrestled with questions that many of us face in times of suffering. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Where is God in all of this pain? His friends, meant to comfort him, only added to his anguish with their misguided attempts to explain his suffering. But here's where Job's story challenges us. In the face of inexplicable loss, his faith bent but didn't break. Even as he questioned and lamented, Job never let go of his belief in God's goodness. "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him," Job declared. It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding on to hope even when life doesn't make sense. Job's journey forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about suffering. Sometimes, bad things happen to good people. Our pain isn't always a direct result of our actions. In fact, Job's story suggests that our trials might have purposes beyond what we can see or understand. As we watch Job's story unfold, we can't help but wonder, how will it end? Will God answer Job's cries for understanding? Will his faith be rewarded? In a stunning turn of events, God does respond, not with an explanation, but with a powerful reminder of his sovereignty and wisdom. And then, in an act of divine restoration, God blesses Job with double what he had before. New children, greater wealth, and a longer life become the capstone of Job's story. But here's the thing, Job's restoration wasn't just about getting back what he lost. It was about emerging from his trials with a deeper, more profound understanding of God. His faith, tested by fire, came out stronger and more resilient than ever before. What does this mean for us? True divine restoration isn't just about replacing what was lost. It's about transformation, becoming something new and beautiful through our trials. Job's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God is at work, shaping us and preparing us for blessings we can't yet imagine. As we move forward, let's carry Job's example with us. From the ashes of despair to the abundance of blessing, his journey shows us that with God, no season of suffering is wasted. Our pain can become the very thing that deepens our faith and prepares us for greater purpose. Have you ever felt stuck in life's waiting room? You're not alone. Many of us have experienced that frustrating sense of being in limbo, wondering why God seems to be taking his sweet time. But what if these periods of waiting aren't delays, but divine preparation? Let's explore how God's workshop operates on a timeline we can't always see or understand. Think about it. Some of the Bible's greatest heroes spent years, even decades, in what seemed like God's waiting room. Abraham, the father of faith, waited 25 years for God's promise of a son to be fulfilled. Can you imagine the roller coaster of emotions he must have experienced? Hope, doubt, frustration, and maybe even moments of despair. Yet through it all, Abraham's faith was being refined and strengthened. Or consider Moses, who spent 40 years in the desert before God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. That's 4 decades of seemingly mundane shepherding, while the burning passion to help his people simmered beneath the surface. It's easy to wonder, God, why the delay? Why not use Moses right away? But in those years of waiting, Moses was being shaped into the humble, patient leader God needed him to be. And let's not forget David, anointed as the future king while still a young shepherd. He then spent years running for his life from King Saul. Talk about a confusing detour. David's journey from shepherd to sovereign wasn't a straight line. It was filled with twists, turns, and long periods of waiting. Yet it was in those years that many of the Psalms were written, giving us timeless words of wisdom and worship. These stories challenge us to reframe our perspective on waiting. Instead of seeing it as wasted time, what if we viewed it as a season of growth and preparation? Just as a seed needs time in the dark soil before it can sprout and flourish, sometimes we need periods of obscurity to develop deep roots of faith and character. But let's be honest, waiting is hard. It's easy to feel forgotten or overlooked, especially when we see others moving forward while we seem to be standing still. We might find ourselves crying out, God, are you even listening? Have you forgotten about me? These are normal feelings, and God isn't afraid of our honest questions. So what is God doing behind the scenes during these waiting periods? Often, He's working on us more than He's working on our circumstances. He's developing patience, deepening our trust, and aligning our hearts with His purposes. Sometimes, He's orchestrating events and aligning circumstances in ways we can't see or understand. Remember, God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't feel that way to us. As it says in Ecclesiastes 3:1, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven." This verse reminds us that there's a divine rhythm to life, and sometimes waiting is part of that rhythm. So how can we trust God's timing when everything seems delayed? It starts with surrendering our timelines and expectations to Him. It means choosing to believe that He is good and that He is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see it. It's about focusing on growing in faith and character during the wait, rather than just enduring until it's over. As we learn to wait well, something beautiful happens. We begin to move from impatience to trust, from anxiety to peace. We discover that the waiting room can actually be a place of profound growth and intimacy with God. So if you're in a season of waiting right now, take heart. God hasn't forgotten you. He's preparing you for things beyond what you can imagine. From the waiting room to the workshop, God's transformative power doesn't stop at preparation. But here's a challenging thought. What if our greatest pain is actually God's chisel, sculpting us into a masterpiece? Let's step into the potter's house and discover how even our toughest trials can become tools of divine artistry. Remember the image of the potter shaping clay on his wheel? It's a beautiful metaphor, but let's be honest, the process isn't always gentle. Have you ever watched a potter at work? Their hands knead and press the clay, sometimes with considerable force. They may slice off excess material or use tools to create grooves and textures. To the clay, this might feel uncomfortable, even painful. In our lives, God often uses similar techniques to shape us. Sometimes He applies pressure through challenging circumstances. Other times, He may remove things from our lives that we thought were essential. He might even allow us to experience hardships that feel like they're cutting us to the core. C.S. Lewis once said, "Hardship often prepares an ordinary person for an extraordinary destiny." This profound insight reminds us that our pain isn't purposeless. It's part of God's sculpting process. Think about the biblical figures we've explored: Joseph in the pit, David in the wilderness, Job in his suffering. Each of these men underwent intense, shaping experiences that were crucial to their spiritual formation. Their stories teach us that God's restoration often involves a transformation that can be uncomfortable or even painful. But how do we recognize God's hand in these difficult circumstances? It's not always easy, especially when we're in the midst of the storm. Yet, if we look closely, we might see patterns emerging. Are we developing more patience, growing in compassion, learning to trust God in deeper ways? These are often signs that the master potter is at work. The real challenge comes in how we respond to this divine shaping. Do we resist, complaining about the pressure and discomfort? Or do we yield to the potter's hands, trusting that he knows exactly what he's doing? The choice is ours, and it plays a crucial role in our restoration process. When we surrender to God's work in our lives, something beautiful begins to emerge. Like clay taking on its final form, we start to reflect more of God's character. Our rough edges are smoothed, our capacity for love and service increases, and we become vessels fit for God's purposes. Remember, the goal isn't just to endure the painful parts of life, but to actively participate in the transformation God is working in us. This might mean choosing forgiveness when we'd rather hold on to bitterness, or stepping out in faith when we'd prefer to play it safe. It's about moving from resistance to surrender, from pain to purpose. As we close this section, I want you to consider, what areas of your life feel like they're under pressure right now? Could these be the very places where God is doing His most important work? Trust that the Master Potter knows exactly what He's doing. Your challenges today might just be shaping you for an extraordinary tomorrow. Have you ever considered that the very things you're most ashamed of could become your greatest source of strength? As we've seen how God shapes us through challenges, let's explore how He can transform our deepest wounds into powerful testimonies of hope. We all have scars, don't we? Some are visible, etched on our skin, while others are hidden deep within our hearts. These scars often represent our past failures, painful experiences, or moments of weakness. It's tempting to hide them, to cover them up, and pretend they don't exist. We fear that if others see our scars, they'll judge us or think less of us. But what if I told you that God sees beauty in those scars, that He can use them to create something extraordinary? Think about it. A broken bone, when healed properly, becomes stronger at the point of fracture. In the same way, our emotional and spiritual scars, when healed by God's grace, can become sources of incredible strength and wisdom. The Bible is full of examples of what we might call wounded healers, people whose past pain became a powerful tool for helping others. Take the Apostle Paul, for instance. Before his encounter with Jesus, he was known as Saul, a fierce persecutor of Christians. Can you imagine the guilt and shame he must have carried? Yet God transformed Paul's past into a testament of his grace. Paul's personal experiences of failure and redemption gave him a unique ability to connect with others and share the gospel. Or consider Peter, who we talked about earlier. His denial of Jesus could have been the end of his story. Instead, it became a powerful part of his testimony. Peter's failure and subsequent restoration equipped him to strengthen his brothers and sisters in faith. His scars became a source of hope for others who had stumbled. These stories challenge us to rethink how we view our own past failures and pain. What if the very things we're most ashamed of could become our most powerful tools for ministry? What if our scars could offer hope to someone else who's hurting? You see, there's a unique power in vulnerability and authenticity. When we're willing to share our struggles and how God has worked in our lives, it opens doors for genuine connection and healing. It's in these moments of shared brokenness that we often experience the deepest sense of community and the most profound encounters with God's grace. But here's the real question. How can we move from hiding our scars to sharing them as a testimony? It starts with accepting God's forgiveness and healing for ourselves. As we embrace the truth that God loves us, scars and all, we become more comfortable with our own story. Then, as we share our experiences with wisdom and discernment, we'll find that our past failures can actually prepare us for future purpose. Remember, your scars tell a story of survival, of God's faithfulness, of growth and redemption. They're evidence that you've faced challenges and come through the other side. And in sharing that story, you might just become the beacon of hope that someone else needs. So, as we continue our journey of restoration, let's embrace a new perspective. Let's move from shame to sharing, from hiding to healing. Your scars aren't meant to be hidden away. They're meant to be a powerful testimony of God's transformative love. Who knows? The very thing you've been trying to hide might just become your most powerful tool for bringing hope and healing to others. Have you ever wondered what the ultimate happily ever after looks like in God's story? As we stand in the midst of life's ongoing challenges, there's a promise of restoration so profound, it challenges our very understanding of reality. Let's explore what this divine restoration really means for us. We've journeyed through stories of brokenness and redemption, from shattered vessels to prodigal sons. We've seen how God can take our deepest wounds and transform them into powerful testimonies. But here's the thing. Even as we experience God's healing touch in our lives, we still face the realities of living in a fallen world. Pain, disappointment, and loss continue to be part of our journey. So how do we reconcile the promise of restoration with the ongoing struggles we face? It's a question that many of us wrestle with. We might wonder, if God is in the business of restoration, why do I still feel broken in some areas? The truth is, our earthly experience of healing is often incomplete. We catch glimpses of God's restorative power, but we don't yet see its full manifestation. This is where the biblical promise of ultimate restoration comes in. In Revelation 21:5, we read these powerful words, "Behold, I am making all things new." It's a declaration that goes beyond patching up what's broken. God is promising a complete renewal, a restoration that surpasses our wildest dreams. Think about it for a moment. What would it look like for everything in your life to be made new? Not just repaired or improved, but truly transformed into something glorious? It's almost too wonderful to comprehend, isn't it? But how do we hold on to hope when our present reality falls short of this promise? It's not always easy, especially when we're in the midst of pain or disappointment. Yet, it's in these very moments that our faith has the opportunity to grow deeper roots. We learn to trust not just in what we can see, but in the unseen work of God in our lives. C.S. Lewis offers a powerful perspective on this. He reminds us that while we live in a world bound by time, God operates outside these constraints. This means that nothing is beyond His ability to renew and restore. The broken pieces of our lives, the dreams that seem shattered beyond repair, God can take all of these and weave them into a beautiful tapestry of redemption. So what does God's final restoration look like? The Bible paints a picture of a renewed heaven and earth where there's no more pain, sorrow, or death. It's a place where we'll experience perfect communion with God and with each other. But it's not just about escaping this world. As Lewis points out, it's about God coming down to dwell with His people, making all things new and right. This promise of ultimate restoration gives us hope in the midst of our earthly struggles. It reminds us that our current challenges are not the end of the story. God is working all things together for good, even when we can't see or understand it. Our broken dreams might just be the first brushstrokes of God's masterpiece. As we close, remember this: God's ability to renew our lives goes far beyond what we can imagine. The best chapters of your story are yet to be written. So let's lift our eyes from our present circumstances to the glorious future that awaits. From earthly struggles to eternal glory, God is leading us on a journey of restoration that will culminate in something more beautiful than we can possibly comprehend. Have you ever looked at your life and wondered how God could possibly make something beautiful out of the mess? We've journeyed through stories of brokenness and redemption, seeing how God can transform our deepest wounds into powerful testimonies. But here's the incredible truth: God's restoration goes far beyond what we can imagine. Think about the broken pieces in your life, the disappointments, the failures, the lost dreams. What if I told you that God sees those fragments not as trash, but as raw material for a masterpiece? He's inviting you to surrender those pieces to Him, to trust Him as the master restorer. Remember, your story isn't over. In fact, the best chapters might be yet to come. God's promise in Jeremiah 29:11 still stands. He has plans to give you hope and a future. So let's take a step of faith together. Will you open your hands and offer those broken pieces to God? He's waiting to show you just how far His restoration can go.